The Mediterranean was a kingdom without borders, where the waves traced the paths of kings and storms decided the fate of civilizations. Before the name of Poseidon was whispered by sailors, the sea was already feared and revered as a living force. For the first peoples who inhabited its coasts, fishermen, merchants, and navigators, the ocean was not just a passage between distant lands but an unfathomable spirit, an invisible god who could grant riches or drag entire ships into the darkness. Long before Homer sang his epics, the sea had already swallowed empires and shaped the faith of men. At the heart of this maritime world, the Minoan civilization flourished on the island of Crete. Around 3000 BCE, the Minoans dominated the waters with their swift vessels, connecting with Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the unknown world beyond the horizon. Their palaces, like the majestic palace of Knossos, were adorned with vibrant frescoes depicting dolphins, fish, and marine creatures that seemed to dance among the red and gold columns. But among all the images, one stood out: the bull. For the Minoans, this animal was not just a symbol of strength but a manifestation of an ancient power, an untamed spirit that made the earth tremble and roared like the waves in the midst of a storm. They believed that the sea and the land were intertwined, like two rival gods locked in an eternal struggle. And somewhere between these two domains dwelled a lord of the waters and earthquakes, invisible to the eye yet present in every tremor that made the palaces shudder. His priests invoked him in secret rituals, offering wine and blood to the night wind. His true names were lost in time, but in whispers, it was said that he had existed long before Zeus ruled over the gods. But the Minoans were not the only ones to feel the presence of this power. On the Greek mainland, another civilization was emerging: the Mycenaeans. More brutal, more warlike, they did not see the sea as an ally but as a treacherous enemy that needed to be conquered. While the Minoans built temples to appease the ocean, the Mycenaeans erected stone fortresses, sharpened their swords, and prepared to invade Crete. They believed they did not need to fear the gods, only to defeat them. It was in this clash between two civilizations that the legend took shape. When the Mycenaeans conquered Crete around 1450 BCE, they did not destroy the Minoan gods. They absorbed them, transforming them into something new, more violent, more relentless. The spirit of the waters became a warrior. The roar of the waves became his voice. The earthquakes became his fury. What was once just a god whispered in underground temples rose from the depths and took a name that would never be forgotten: Poseidon. Before being immortalized on Mount Olympus, before wielding his trident against Zeus, he already reigned, invisible, in the waves and the abysses. Poseidon was not born a mere god. He emerged from the primordial forces that shaped the world itself, from the fear of sailors, from the power of the seas, and from the rumble of earthquakes that toppled empires. And even today, when the earth trembles or a furious wave rises on the horizon, there are those who remember the first and true sovereign of the ocean. The night was dense over Crete. The wind blew strong, carrying the scent of salt and storm. At the top of the cliffs, where the sea crashed against the dark rocks, a procession of Minoan priests walked in silence, carrying torches and offerings. Their cloaks billowed, and their eyes reflected the glow of the sacred fire burning in the island's oldest temple. Something was wrong. The sea was restless, and the earth, which should have been firm beneath their feet, seemed to pulse as if it were alive. They knew what this meant. The spirit of the waters was awakening. The priests gathered around a stone altar carved with ancient symbols: dolphins, waves, whirlpools, and, at the center, the sacred bull, whose image was revered as the manifestation of the ocean's power. The connection between the sea and bulls had always been a mystery. The roar of the animals resembled the sound of waves crashing furiously against the cliffs, and their hooves striking the ground echoed like subterranean thunder. For the Minoans, the ocean was not a serene god but a wild beast that needed to be tamed. They raised cups of wine, murmured ancient chants, and offered sacrifices, hoping to calm the invisible entity that dwelled in the depths. Then, it happened. A deep and distant sound echoed from the depths of the earth, a rumble that made the temple columns tremble. The sea seemed to recede for an instant, as if gathering strength, and then a colossal wave surged forward, swallowing the coast with a deafening roar. The priests fell to their knees, and the high priest raised his hands to the sky. In his voice, there was not only supplication, there was fear. He called upon the name of the spirit of the sea, Poseidon. The whispers spread like a cold wind among the priests. It was a name rarely spoken, a name as ancient as the tides, as powerful as the tremors that shook Crete. It was said that by invoking him, the very sea would listen. And he did. The ground shook harder, and the wave retreated, as if something or someone had accepted the offering. At that moment, not just a name was born, but a destiny. The spirit of the oceans and earthquakes would no longer be merely an invisible force. It would take form, gain a face, and become a god. And men would never forget him. Long before he was worshipped as an Olympian god, Poseidon was feared as a relentless warrior, a spirit of the ocean who walked among men. Sailors told stories of a mysterious leader who emerged from the waters, riding a white horse as foamy as the sea. They said his eyes shone like the deep blue of the ocean, and wherever he passed, the winds bowed to his will. He was no ordinary king, he was something more. A lord of the tides, whose domain stretched from treacherous reefs to the infinite horizon. When the Mycenaeans came from the mainland, armed with spears and bronze shields, they did not find a docile people in Crete. The Minoans, masters of the seas, fought fiercely, guided by their protective spirit. The war between the two civilizations was more than a conflict over territory, it was a clash between two worldviews. To the Minoans, the sea was a god to be revered. To the Mycenaeans, it was an enemy to be conquered. During the invasion of Crete, Minoan temples burned in flames, and their cities crumbled under the weight of the invaders. But the decisive battle was not fought on land, it was in the ocean itself. The Mycenaeans launched their heavy ships against the Minoan fleet, expecting a swift victory. But the waters were restless. The currents shifted, the winds turned against the invaders, and giant waves rose without explanation. It is said that on that day, among the warriors who drowned at sea, a man walked upon the waters, raising a golden spear that shone like the sun itself. The legend tells that with a single strike of this spear, which would later be known as Poseidon's Trident, the waters parted and swallowed the Mycenaean ships. The surviving soldiers, upon returning to their lands, did not speak of an enemy fleet or a terrestrial army. They spoke of a warrior who fought alongside the sea itself, a lord of the abyss who could not be defeated. The Mycenaeans conquered Crete, but they did not erase its deity. Instead, they absorbed the spirit of the ocean into their own culture, transforming him into something more violent, more tempestuous. He ceased to be merely a force of nature and became a warrior god. Poseidon, lord of the seas and earthquakes. His name was recorded on ancient clay tablets written in Linear B, the language of the Mycenaeans, where he appeared not as a simple aquatic entity but as one of the most powerful figures in the pantheon. Now, he was no longer just a spirit worshipped by sailors. He was a god who commanded storms and sank entire fleets. And when the Greeks built their temples and carved their stories, the warrior of the depths had already become an immortal legend. The centuries passed, and the world changed. The Minoans had vanished, their palaces reduced to ruins. The Mycenaeans also met their end, swallowed by time and war. In the place of these ancient civilizations, classical Greece emerged, with its grand temples and Olympian gods. Zeus, the lord of thunder, took the throne of the skies and declared himself the supreme ruler of the gods. Hades claimed the underworld. And Poseidon, who had once ruled the seas and earthquakes with uncontrollable wrath, was relegated to the waters. He did not accept this. For the peoples who lived on land, the gods of the skies were sovereign, but for those who depended on the sea, fishermen, sailors, merchants, Poseidon was the most feared and respected entity. Greek navigators knew that the ocean was treacherous, that its currents could change without warning, that its storms came without mercy. They knew that the sea had a will of its own, and that will belonged to Poseidon. If men did not worship him properly, he would punish them without hesitation. His resentment was deep. When the Athenians chose Athena, the goddess of wisdom, as their protector instead of him, Poseidon responded with fury. He struck the ground with his trident, opening a fissure in the earth and causing salty, undrinkable waters to gush forth. As punishment, he vowed that Athens would suffer droughts and storms. For years, the region's fishermen feared venturing out to sea without first offering tributes to the rejected god. They knew that Poseidon did not forgive betrayals. His wrath also fell upon heroes. When Odysseus dared to blind the Cyclops Polyphemus, the god's son, Poseidon turned his journey back to Ithaca into a nightmare. Odysseus wandered the seas for 10 years, being cast from island to island, forced to face monsters and endless storms. He was not the only one to suffer the wrath of the Lord of the Seas. Many kings and warriors felt his fury when they dared to challenge him or ignore his offerings. Poseidon was not like Zeus, who forgave easily. His punishment came with waves and destruction. Over time, his cult spread, and temples were erected in his honor. The most famous of them, the Temple of Poseidon at Saunian, stood upon a cliff, gazing at the infinite sea, as if watching over his eternal domain. Yet, something had changed. Men had begun to fear the gods of the sky more than the gods of the sea. Poseidon, the lord of the abyss, was no longer worshipped as he once was. His power remained, but the world of men was slowly forgetting him. However, the sea never forgets, and the ocean never forgives. When Zeus's thunder fades, when the cities of men crumble to dust, the waves will continue roaring, the earthquakes will keep shaking the earth, and Poseidon will still be waiting. For he is older than temples, older than kings, older than the very gods of Olympus. He is not just a legend. He is the ocean, eternal, merciless, and untamed. Empires fell, kingdoms changed, and the names of ancient kings were lost to time. But the sea remained the same. It continued carrying ships into the unknown, swallowing vessels in sudden storms, and returning bodies to the shores as reminders of its uncontrollable power. And whenever men gazed at the horizon, fearing what lay beyond the waves, they whispered Poseidon's name. His cult may have faded over time, but his presence was never forgotten. For as long as there were oceans, there would be Poseidon. His temples, like the magnificent temple of Poseidon at Saunian, were built atop cliffs, where priests and sailors could look upon the endless blue and offer tributes to the god. It was customary to break bottles of wine and cast offerings into the sea before setting sail, asking for protection against storms and the monsters of the deep. The superstition endured for millennia. Even after the fall of ancient Greece, Roman, Byzantine, and even medieval explorers followed the tradition of offering something to the ocean before a long journey, a habit that, in some ways, survives to this day. In art and culture, Poseidon continued to appear, represented in sculptures, coins, and paintings. His trident became a symbol of power and dominion over the unknown. His image was reinterpreted over the centuries, but his essence remained. He is the wild force of the sea, the guardian of abyssal mysteries, the god whose fury can never be fully calmed. And even though his temples have been reduced to ruins, his spirit survives in legends and in the tides. But perhaps Poseidon's most enduring legacy is not just in temples or stories, but in the very way humans perceive the sea. The ocean is still seen as a sacred and uncontrollable place. Even today, fishermen and sailors speak of the sea with reverence, as if it had a will of its own. The fear that Greek navigators felt thousands of years ago has not disappeared, it has only transformed. Poseidon may have been forgotten as a god, but his influence still lives on in the waters that were never truly tamed. And so, as the wind blows over the waves, as the depths conceal secrets yet to be revealed, the Lord of the Abyss remains, silent, eternal, waiting. For men may change, but the sea will never be forgotten, and neither will the one who rules it.